I heard my ribs crack under the chair. The called my parents, they said. She had it coming. Even after, she may not survive. They never showed in court. The x-rays made their hands shake. Then I walked into court with the x-rays. The crack came first, sharp and sickening, followed by an explosion of pain so fierce it stole the air from my lungs. The wooden chair had smashed into my ribs with a force that felt like it split me in half. The jagged edge of its impact biting deep into bone. My body folded sideways before I even realized I was falling, and then the floor rose up to meet me with a dull, unforgiving thud. I gasped, but no air came, just a shallow wheeze that scraped my throat. The fire spreading through my side was blinding, and I could hear my heartbeat pounding loud and uneven in my ears above me. Melissa stood with her hands still gripping the chair legs, her knuckles white, her breath heavy, eyes glittering with something cruel. That is what you get for talking back. She spat the words, dripping with contempt. The sound of the chair tipping back onto its legs echoed through the room, an almost lazy clatter that made the violence feel even more deliberate. I tasted blood, metallic and hot as it pooled under my tongue. My mother's voice floated from the kitchen, casual and distracted, asking what was going on. Melissa answered nothing, just a little disagreement. My father appeared in the doorway. His face unreadable. His eyes moving over my curled figure on the carpet, as if I were nothing more than a dropped coat. "Get up," he said, flat, no urgency, no concern. The pain was so deep I could barely hear him over the roaring in my head. Every breath stabbed at me from the inside, each movement threatened to snap something else. My vision narrowed until the edges went dark, leaving only the image of Melissa lowering the chair back to the floor like she had just finished rearranging the furniture. The moment fractured months later. I was walking into the courthouse. The echo of my shoes on the tile, steady, deliberate every step, fueled by the memory of that day. In my hands was a manila envelope, warmed from my grip inside it the x-rays that showed the clean, unmistakable lines of 2 fractured ribs marked in black ink by the radiologist. I remembered the chair, the look on Melissa's face, the way my father had turned away the courthouse. Air was cool, but my skin burned with the memory of humiliation and rage. This time, it would not be buried under excuses or family loyalty. This time, the images would speak for me. In the bright, open air of a courtroom that day, the chair had done more than break bone. It had broken the last tie, binding me to the idea that I owed Melissa my silence. I grew up in a 2-story house on the edge of a small Ohio town, the kind of place where everyone knew each other's names and where the white picket fences tried to hide what went on behind closed doors. My parents, Frank and Janet, prided themselves on appearances, always making sure the lawn was perfect and the curtains matched the seasons inside the house, though there was a different kind of order, one that revolved entirely around my older sister, Melissa. From the moment I was old enough to notice patterns, it was clear she was the sun in our family's small solar system, and I was a distant planet orbiting in the cold. Frank worked long hours at the auto shop and came home with grease still under his nails, but always managed to smile for Melissa. For me, he offered nods, short and brisk, as if acknowledging my presence was enough. Janet was the kind of mother who could turn warmth on and off like a switch. And with Melissa, it was always on. She hovered over her, praised her every effort, even the smallest ones. If Melissa drew a crooked heart on a piece of scrap paper, it was framed on the fridge like a masterpiece. When I brought home a perfect spelling test, Janet would glance at it, offer a faint good job, and then turn to see what Melissa was doing. This difference wasn't loud or dramatic, but it was constant, and it sank into me in ways I didn't fully understand until I was much older. At school, I learned to work hard, not for praise, but because it was the only way I could control something in my life. I was the kid who did her homework early, who stayed out of trouble, who tried to be invisible at home, because invisibility seemed safer than competing with Melissa for affection. I would never win. Melissa, on the other hand, thrived on attention. She could be charming when she wanted something, and ruthless when she didn't get it. The house bent around her moods. If she was happy, the air felt lighter and my parents relaxed. If she was angry, the tension settled like a heavy fog, and everyone adjusted their tone and actions to avoid provoking her further. Frank and Janet saw this as normal family dynamics, just a strong-willed child needing more attention. I saw it as living with a storm cloud that could erupt at any moment. From my earliest memories, there were moments when I thought maybe if I tried hard enough, they would see me too. When I was 7, I spent weeks working on a diorama for the school's history fair, cutting tiny pieces of cardboard, painting miniature furniture, arranging every detail. I won first prize and walked home with my ribbon glowing with pride. Janet took it from my hands, glanced at it and said, "That's nice," before turning to watch Melissa wobbling down the driveway on her bike without training wheels. I told myself that was a bigger milestone. Riding a bike was something you only learned once. That was how I justified it, how I kept from feeling the sting. But over time, those stings added up until they became a constant ache. The dinners where Melissa dominated the conversation and my parents laughed at all her stories. The weekends when plans were canceled for me because Melissa needed help with a project or had a minor cold. The quiet understanding that my role was to adapt to her needs while mine were negotiable. That was the backdrop to everything that came later. The reason why when Melissa's temper flared into violence that day with the chair, it didn't feel like an isolated event. It felt like the inevitable outcome of years of imbalance, years where she was taught her wants mattered more than my safety. By the time I was a teenager, the pattern was so ingrained it felt like part of the house itself, like the way the stairs creaked in the same spot, or how the kitchen smelled of coffee every morning. Melissa's dominance and my parents' indulgence had shaped everything. She was older by 2 years, and carried that like a badge, using it to justify every order and every insult. If I refused to give her the sweater she wanted to borrow, she would stomp to our parents, declaring I was selfish, and they would scold me for not sharing if she misplaced something. She claimed I had taken it, and their eyes turned to me first. The imbalance wasn't just emotional, it was physical. I learned early that Melissa's temper had no boundaries.